Hi, I'm Dr. Scott Turansky with the National Center for Biblical Parenting. And today I want to zoom in on one particular area of our parenting. It has to do with this idea of getting things done forward. And I find that many children have a challenge with their parents because parents use yelling to accomplish tasks. Find ourselves frustrated with our children because we're trying to get things done. We're trying to get them out of the house, get them in bed, get things cleaned up in the morning. And as we're trying to get things done, then that frustration then builds in us, and then yelling is the natural result of that. So I'd like to help you understand a little bit more about how to get things done without yelling, because sometimes parents say to us, I can't, my kids won't do anything. They won't get things done unless I yell. And so I want to try to help you understand the dynamic here. Yelling is an indicator to children, and if they don't get moving, the parents are upset. And it often works. The problem is that yelling pays a toll on the relationship, and so the relationship ends up suffering. Yelling is just a cue. If you know that yelling is a cue that tells children they need to get moving, it means that you just need to change the cue. Now, firmness is really important with children. So when you give them an instruction, they really should do it right away. And if they don't, then you need to take action, because firmness builds character. But yelling damages that relationship that we want with our children. So let's change the cues. It's going to take some work, some practice, but you might sit down with your son. Say, son, I realize that I've been making a mistake, I think, sometimes, when I'm trying to get something done and you're not responding the way I want, and then I start yelling. And I don't think yelling is the best thing for us, and I don't think you like it when I yell, but you do need to get things done. So I'd like to rework this. Let's try to plan this a different way so that yelling doesn't have to be part of our routine that we go through in order to accomplish homework or getting up in the morning or whatever it is. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use some words that communicate to you a cue, and if you don't take action, I'm going to take action, basically, is what's going to happen. So what we're doing is we're moving to our action point more quickly. You see, if you yell at a child and they don't move, then you start moving toward them, you start doing something that's going to take some action. And I'm just suggesting, one thing that we can do is tighten that action point. That action point where you stop talking and you start acting. We don't have to have anger in the middle there. But it's going to take some practice. If a child hasn't learned how to come when called, that's a great place to start. When I call your name, you need to come. If you don't come, I'm coming after you. Now, your job is to make the child feel uncomfortable because you're building this sense of obligation. But that doesn't mean you have to yell at a child. Sometimes just getting close to a child and saying, I called your name, you need to come now. The word now and you need to are great cues to help children realize that you're at your action point. If you're using other cues first that are not clear, like, I think you ought to get your coat on before you go outside, well, is that a suggestion or an idea? And it makes our communication unclear. I would suggest that one of the things we can do to help our children realize that we mean business is to use word cues like you need to now, instead of relying on yelling to get something done. If we do that, then children start learning that there's something that needs to take place, that they need to take action more quickly. Now, this is very important that parents, we learn to take action and we do something about it if a child's not responding. Part of it means we don't give the announcement that we're going out the door until we're ready to do something about it. That doesn't mean you can't give a warning, but when it's actually time to go out the door and you say, get your shoes on, you're not saying get your shoes on and going around and doing a bunch of other things and coming back, get your shoes on again. You say get your shoes on, and then the child needs to move forward. If the child's not moving, you're going over there, because firmness builds character, in this case responsiveness to authority or cooperation that you're trying to develop with a child. But the other challenge with yelling is that children learn to obey. Yes, they'll obey you if you yell, but they learn to obey for the wrong reason. They're learning to obey because of an external motivator. external motivation, a reward or a punishment, or the fear of parental anger. If children are just doing what they need to do because mom might have an eruption, then that's an external motivation. We want to do something that's more internally motivated. So we're building in children this sense of obligation that when I call your name, or when I give you a task to do, there's a response you need to have that is the right response. Now, what we're doing is we're motivating our children to do what they need to do because it's the right thing to do, instead of doing what they need to do so they avoid a parental problem. This isn't about parents just getting upset and getting mad at their kids and therefore getting things done, because it's not just about getting tasks completed. It's about the process we go through to complete them. That's why attitude is so important when you give a child a task to do. That's why their response to you, if it's a groaning or a huffing, is a problem. Because we're looking for a pattern of response, a tendency. Remember, it's Jesus that told us that it's out of the heart that the mouth speaks. There's this tendency that needs to take place. Now, there are a number of ways. One is to use the words "you need to" now, but another way to practice firmness is when a child's doing something that is counterproductive, such as whining or arguing or teasing or interrupting, in all of that strategy, which is basically stopping the process earlier. So a child who starts whining, we say, well, that's whining. I'm not participating in that. Instead of the dialogue. Now, dialogue is good with children, except when you put it in the wrong places. If you put dialogue in when you're giving instructions, then children can use it to manipulate delay in the following arguing into the picture, and you engage in arguing or dialogue with children who want to use logic to change your mind. You're validating their process, and that process can be damaging to their internal ability to follow instructions or do what they need to do, whether they want to or not. Be careful about putting dialogue in the wrong place. If you put dialogue in the wrong place, then you can end up encouraging children to develop some negative patterns, and that will not only be counterproductive for their future, but it's hindering life now and increases tension. Your kids need firmness. So firmness is going to be an important part of your plan and your work with your children. But this is going to take some practice on your part to make some adjustments and some changes to use firmness, not yelling, to get things done. And as you do, then your children will learn how to respond more with internal motivation, that there's a process that needs to be done. All of that is important. So I'd encourage you, focus in on firmness. It's important. But yelling is counterproductive. It's a shortcut that has lasting damage in the life of a child, hinders your relationship. You don't want to have to use yelling as your motivation to get kids going. Now, I wrote an article about this in Thriving Kids Connection because it's one of the 7 tools we use to help parents make changes. You can learn about those 7 tools at the bottom of the article. The article is called Yelling Isn't Necessary, But Firmness Is. Go to thrivingkidsconnection.com. I also want to point out that Thriving Kids Connection is open 2 months of the year. It's open in April and September. April is almost here, so you might want to check out Thriving Kids Connection as this opportunity where you can be interacting and engaged with me and other coaches and parents who are interested in this heart-based approach. It's the most effective way to bring about change in the lives of children. The 7 tools are strategic. One of those is firmness. We're talking about firmness this week, and so I encourage you to make some adjustments to embrace firmness to maximize your parenting. May God bless you. I'm Scott Turansky from the National Center for Biblical Parenting. Check us out at thrivingkidsconnection.com.